Hey guys, it's Jackson here from Titanic Games, and today we're going to be continuing on with the survival series, and we'll be setting up a stamina and sprinting mechanic for our character, and then later we'll be adding some kind of stamina stuff to our jumps and other actions that we'll perform later. So let's go ahead and get started. So first thing I want to do is point out that I've just made a few minor changes outside of the videos that I've done here. The first being that I got rid of the box trigger that was in the level, so go ahead and just get rid of that. We don't really need it. And then in the level blueprint, I deleted all the code too. So you don't need that. I mean, you can leave it if you want, but I don't have it anymore. Okay. So the next thing I did was inside of our blueprints in our character here, I organized a little bit, and under the attribute, or excuse me, not these attributes. For the functions, I took everything that we had and put them all into their respective categories. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video right now, you can do that and organize yours the same way I have them, or however you find works best for you. So yeah, go ahead and do that. So anyways, once you've done that or haven't done it, the only other change that I made was under hunger and thirst. I took the hunger depletion amount, or I guess I haven't yet, so let's do that. So I have it set to 20 from the last video for debugging purposes, so we'll set it back to 1. And then thirst depletion amount, we'll set that to 1 as well. So compile and save. And now we're ready to get started. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some new variables here. First one, we'll call it current stamina. We'll change that to a float so that all the other ones we make will be floats now too. So we'll call this next one max stamina. We'll make one called stamina decrease amount. Create another one called stamina increase. Am I spelling that right? Nope. Increase amount. Create one called stamina update rate. Oops. And that will be how often we add or subtract our stamina. And then we're going to kind of have kind of a out of breath functionality, if you will, and basically how it'll work is once we run out of stamina, we'll kind of have this like little delay before we can start regenerating stamina again. So to do that, we'll add a new variable called out of breath delay. Okay, and then we'll create one more just called out of breath question mark, and that will be a boolean. Okay, so we have all of our variables here. Let's go ahead and organize them really quick before we continue any farther. So we'll take current stamina, go to category, and we'll put it in a category called attributes vertical bar stamina. Okay, so just go ahead and do that for the rest of them, and I'll see you in a sec. Alright, so next we can give all these some default values. So we'll say 100 for current stamina, 100 for max. Stamina decrease amount, we'll just go with 1 for now, and increase amount will be 1 as well. Now stamina update rate, we'll make that 0.05, which basically means every 0.05 seconds, so 20 times per second, it will call the functions that we need. And that's so that it's kind of a nice smooth transition with our progress bars instead of kind of a choppy, like subtracting big chunks of say 5 or 10. So that's the reasoning behind that. Out of breath delay, we'll give it a default of maybe 2 seconds, and out of breath should be false to start. Okay, there we go. Compile and save, and now we're ready to get started with actually the events now. So to add our event, we're going to go to Edit, Project Settings, and Input, and under Action Mappings, we're going to add a new one. So we'll call this Sprint, and we'll say left shift for the key, and then we'll add one more key and call it gamepad left thumbstick button, and that's for those of you who are doing kind of gamepad related stuff. So there we go, we have our sprint function. We can close that now. Let's go ahead and right click in the event graph here, and we'll search for event sprint. Okay, and now what we're going to do with this is, well, we want to do a check, and we want to check if we meet a certain amount of requirements in order to allow us to sprint. So we're going to hold the B key and click, and that will create a branch for us. So I like to do that rather than always searching for branch, because even though it's fast, it's faster to just hold B and click. So I'll be doing that quite often from now forward. Okay, so for the condition, like I said, we need to create a function that will do this check. So create one, call it can sprint. Okay. And for this, we're going to add an output that needs to be a Boolean, and we'll just call it return value. That's fine. All right, now this list may expand or like the list of requirements may expand as we add new mechanics and or decide on certain things that we want to limit our sprinting capabilities. So because of that, we're going to drag off of return value here and type and add a and operator. So basically, this will return true as long as all of the things attached to it return true as well. Okay, so first thing we want to check is if our character is moving. Okay, so we'll say get velocity. That will get the velocity of our actor. Okay, now from here we want to get the vector length. Oops, not vector length squared, excuse me, just vector length. And that will return a value between 0, which isn't moving at all, and our max walk speed. So if you want to see the max walk speed, you can click on character movement, go under the section for walking, and you'll see right here max walk speed. So actually, while we're here, we're going to go ahead and change this to a value of 400 because later that will play a role. But we're going to basically set our normal jogging speed to slower than what our sprinting speed will be. So we'll go with like a 400 value for jogging and maybe like a 700 or something for sprinting. So we'll go with that for now. We'll take this return value. We'll check if it's greater than, so float greater than float. Gonna move a little bit out of the way here. Plug this in, and we'll check if it's greater than 10. So that'll give us a bit of a dead zone before registering if we can sprint or not. Okay, so the next thing we need to check is we need to check if we are out of breath, or rather not out of breath. So we'll get this. We'll do a not Boolean. And this will return if out of breath is false. So as long as we're not out of breath, we can sprint. Okay, and now this last one, we want to take our character movement and we want to say is falling. Okay, and we don't want to plug it in directly. Instead, we want to say not, because we don't want to sprint if we are falling, or if we're in the air having just jumped or fallen off of something, right? We don't want to be able to decrease our stamina if we're not going to benefit from the sprinting, the speed increase basically. So that's the rationale behind that. So now we can go back to the event graph and we'll add this function in. Okay, so right now you see it has execute nodes, but we're going to get rid of those. So to do that, if we go over here in the details panel, we can click the pure, and that will make this a pure function, which basically just returns a value. It doesn't take any inputs. Well, I mean it can, but I guess what I mean to say is it doesn't have any execution pins. Okay, but then we're also going to make this const. And what this basically does is it tells the function that we aren't going to be modifying any of our class's variables inside of it, right? We're just going to be getting the value of some of the variables, and then we're returning it. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for that. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set a timer, first let's set the speed. So we'll increase our character's speed first. So what we'll do for this is we'll create a function. We'll call it set speed to sprint. Okay, and for this we'll take our character movement and we'll say set max walk speed. Okay, and for our sprint, like I mentioned earlier, we'll set it to about 700. Now, in order to allow this to be a little more editable, in case you're developing a survival game that's going to have more kind of RPG-esque elements, so like maybe you'll be able to increase your character's max running speed or sprint speed or whatever. That's why we're going to create a variable for this. So we'll right click, promote it to a variable. We'll call this sprint speed. Okay, move that out of the way, and there we go. So compile and save that, close it. Okay, so then off of true, we'll say set speed to sprint, like that. There we go. Now, while we're at it, we might as well create a function for setting it back to jogging. So create a function called set speed to jog. And we're basically going to do the same thing as the set sprint to speed, or set speed to sprint. So we'll get our character movement, set max walk speed, hook this up, and now we'll set this back to our default, which will be 400 by default, but we'll promote this to a variable, call this jog speed. I keep grabbing the wrong thing. There we go. Okay, and now with that done, we can close that, close the other one, compile and save. Now, in order to kind of make sure that we always set our default to, that we always set our character's speed to jogging when he first starts, we're going to go to the construction script, and we're going to drag out here, and we're going to say set speed to jog. Okay, so now all you ever need to do to edit his starting speed is edit the jog speed variable, and to edit his sprinting speed, you just edit the sprint speed variable. Okay, so before we get too far ahead, what we're going to do is we're going to create two events. Okay, so we'll find some open space down here. We're going to right click and type custom event. Now this one we're going to call decrease stamina. Did I spell that right? Yeah, I did. Okay, perfect. And then with this, what we're going to do is we're going to drag out and do a branch. So we're going to check something. And what we're going to check is we're going to check if our current stamina minus a certain value, that value being stamina decrease amount. Okay, plug that in. We're going to check if this value is less than something. Now before we check if it's less than, we're going to run it through a clamp. So we're going to clamp it, and we're going to clamp it between 0 and our max stamina. And the reason I like to do clamps so often now is, it just helps to ensure that values never go outside of what you want them to be. So it just helps in that regard, I guess. So anyways, off of the return value, we're going to take this and check if it's less than or equal to 0. Okay, we'll plug that into condition. Okay, now if it's true, what we want to do is say set current stamina. We're going to set it to 0 because this basically means, if this subtraction is less than or equal to 0, then we're out of stamina. So we want to set it to 0. Okay, otherwise we want to set current stamina equal to whatever value this is. Okay, so compile and save that. Now the next thing that we'll do is drag out and we'll say set speed to jog, because now what's happening is our character is starting to has run out of stamina, so now we want them to be out of breath and slowing down. Okay, so with that in mind, we'll say set out of breath, and we'll set this to true. Okay, and then immediately we're going to do a delay. The delay's duration is going to last for this out of breath delay. Okay, now I would put this in a function, but because it's a delay, latent actions can't be performed inside of functions. So that's why we have to keep it out in the event graph, because the event graph, at least to my understanding, handles it a bit differently than in functions by moving it to a different thread, at least moving the function execution to a different thread before returning and executing. So it's kind of a little back-end information there for you. You don't really need to be too concerned with it, but just know that that's the reason that we're doing this. So then we'll say set out of breath back to false. Okay, and then then we'll do some other stuff, but let's come back here and create one more event. So we'll say custom event. We'll call this one increase stamina, and we're basically going to do the same exact thing, just in a bit, just a couple things a little opposite. So we'll copy all this, paste it down here, move it, there we go, hook this up. Okay, so for stamina decrease amount, we'll take our stamina increase amount and replace it. Then we'll get rid of this subtraction and replace it with a plus, so float plus float. Hook these up, plug this into value. Now instead of checking if it's less than or equal to 0, we're going to check if it's greater than or equal to max stamina. Okay, and then rather than setting it to 0 here, we're going to set it equal to max stamina. Alright, so This is a little sloppy, I guess. Maybe I won't actually do that last one there. Just to keep it looking a little nicer, we'll get the max stamina here and plug it in. Nothing changes, but it just looks a little bit cleaner. Okay, and then off of here, we'll also do one last thing. So basically, how we're going to be handling this is we're going to be using timers. Okay, so these timers will be set to decrease or increase our stamina based on, certain parameters. So that's what we'll be doing next. So let's go ahead and go up here to our sprint function, and we're going to drag out and say set timer by function name. Okay, so this is going to be very similar to how we did the hunger and thirst, just with a couple little tweaks. So we'll drag off of object, we'll do self. Again, object, you don't have to set it to self because it automatically defaults to self, but I like to do it because it just helps me, helps me keep in mind that it is being performed on this object, okay, on our character. Okay, so for function name, we're going to call this decrease stamina. So the same name that we have here for decrease stamina. We'll right click on it, promote it to a variable. We'll just call this stamina, we'll call it stamina decrease timer name. Okay, or decrease stamina timer name. It's probably a better name for it. Yeah, I'm gonna rename it. It's a better name. Decrease stamina timer name. Okay, there we go. Okay, we'll set it to looping, and then for time, we want to use stamina update rate. Plug that in, and there we go. And so right away, we can take this and collapse it to a function. So we'll right click, collapse to function, and we'll call this start, decrease stamina. Yeah, decrease stamina timer. There we go. All right, so we have that set now. Let's open it up and just straighten that out. It always bothers me when I come back later. Okay, so we've done that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to also create a variable here that will tell us or help us determine if we're sprinting or not. So we'll create a variable. We'll call this is sprinting ? And this will come into play later once we start adding like stamina capabilities to our jump mechanic. Okay, but for now, all we need to do is drag out and say set, and we'll set it to false. Okay, so now that's essentially it for the sprint true. For the sprint false, we're going to do one. We have a couple little things to do here. So, not this false. For released. Okay, so on released, we're going to immediately set is sprinting back to false. What did I do here? Okay, make sure that one's true. And then from here, we're going to do a branch. And with this branch, we want to check if we're out of breath. Oops. So we'll get this guy, plug it in. Because if we're out of breath, then this function down here is going to handle that out of breath functionality. Okay, and we'll finish that in a second. But if it's false, then what we want to do is set our speed to jog because we're no longer sprinting. All right. Then we're going to do another branch, and we're going to perform a check, which we'll set up in a second. And then the end goal is we want to set another timer. So what we'll do is say set timer by function name. Okay, plug this in. Object will of course be self. Function name this time will be the increase stamina. We'll right click, promote that to a variable called increase stamina timer name. All right, make it looping, and then time should again use stamina update time. We'll take this, collapse it to a function. We'll call this start increase stamina timer. Okay, and then open it up, straighten it out, and there we go. Okay, now the very last thing we need to do is set up functions for clearing the opposite functions. Okay, so to do that, all we're going to do is right click, say clear timer by function name. Object will be self, and then function name. This first one, we'll go ahead and do the decrease one. So plug that in. We'll right click, call this collapse to function, and we'll call this clear decrease stamina timer. Okay, straighten it out. Okay, and we're going to call that off of here. Okay, and I'll do a full walkthrough here at the end of just what everything's doing. Okay, so you guys can all understand. Now we're going to move this out a little bit so that we can create a new one. I guess we'll drag out here and say clear timer by function name. Okay, we're going to drag off of object, say self. Okay, and then function name is going to be our increase stamina timer name. We'll collapse this to a function. Call it clear increase stamina timer. So just make sure you guys are, plugging in the correct variables, naming these correctly, putting them in the correct place. Just make sure you take your time and go slow, because this is all really important to make sure that you get it in the right order, or like make sure that you're doing or clearing the correct timers and starting the correct timers in the right places, because otherwise it'll really mess up your whole stamina increasing and decreasing system. Okay, so there we go. There's our sprint functionality set up now. Or excuse me, we just have one last part to do. So we'll go ahead and cover that now. So what we'll do for this function then is, or this condition, is we'll create a function that we'll call is performing action. Now this will really come to be important later once we start adding in more functionality, but it's good to have it set up now so that we are prepared once we have the mechanics put in place. So this is performing action is just going to have one output. We're going to call it return value. Okay, and instead of doing an and like we did in a previous one for the can sprint, we're going to do an or boolean. Basically, we're going to return true if any of these conditions is satisfied. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to take our character movement. We're going to say is falling. So if our character is falling, it will return true, telling us we are performing an action. Now for the other two, we're going to actually create new variables, which will again come into play later. So we'll create a variable here that we'll call is gathering with a question mark, and this means like, are we gathering supplies, or not supplies, but like resources and crafting items, I guess. So that's what that'll mean. Then we'll add one more called is attacking question mark. Okay, so we'll take both of these, plug them in, and basically if any of them are true, it will return true, telling us we are performing an action. All right, so we'll compile and save. And the last thing, we'll make this pure and const. Okay, so we'll go back out, and we'll take is performing action, drag it out here, hook it up, compile and save, and then let's see, over here we just need to clear some timers really quick. So we'll take everything here, scoot it over. For this first one, so once it runs out, right, this is what it means. So once stamina has gone so low that it runs out, we want to clear the decrease timer. Then we want to set our speed back to jogging. Then we want to say we're out of breath. And then once we've regained breath, we want to start increasing. Start increasing timer. Okay. Now, for the increased stamina, once we reach max stamina, all we need to do is just clear increase stamina timer. Okay, so we can compile and save. And now what we'll do to go visualize this is we'll go back out to our UI game HUD. We'll add a new progress bar in here. We'll set its position X to 40 like all the others. Position Y to 220. Size X 400. Change its name to stamina bar. We'll create a binding in a second. Let's change the color quick to, how about green? I'm going to change maybe like a dark green-ish color, like that. Okay, now we'll create a binding for the percent. Create binding. And we'll take our, well, first we'll move this, and we'll take our character reference, which we have from, some of the previous videos, and we'll say get current stamina. Here we'll say get max stamina. We'll say float divided by float. Plug those in. Hook it up to return value. Okay, then we compile and save. And now, hoping that everything is working out amazingly, if we press play, okay, so we can see our current stamina is up in the top left. And then as we start, if we hold left shift, we start sprinting. So we're moving at 700 speed, and then when we release, we slow back down. Okay, sprint, slow down, sprint, slow down. Now, when we sprint until we run out, okay, we slowed down and it delayed before restarting. Okay, so that's kind of our out of breath. All right, so there we have it. There's how to set up our, sprinting in a manner that will help us extend later once we start adding more actions that we can perform, like jumping and chopping stuff down, or attacking, etc. So let's just go ahead and comment some of this out really quick. Comment this sprint mechanic. Okay, all of this stuff we'll comment out as just we'll call this stamina consumption helper functions, maybe. Because that's essentially what they are. They are meant to just help out later once we start adding more actions and mechanics. Okay, and we'll just go with that for now. I guess last thing that we can do is organize these. So for the sprint, let's go ahead and put it in a category that we can call attributes, vertical bar. How about movement? Okay, we'll do the same for the speed things. So attributes, movement, attributes, movement. Okay. Oh, I just moved the wrong one. Let's undo that. One sec. What did I do? We'll move him back to attributes. We'll just rename it. There we go. Attributes. I didn't mean to do that one. Set speed to jog. That's the one that we want. So move that one back to movement. Now for all of these, we can move them to stamina. Okay, all the stamina timers. Let's see. And there's that one. And then this action one, we'll categorize that later. So anyways, geez, we have these last couple. Okay, so go ahead and we'll reorganize. Yeah, whatever. We'll do it right now. So we'll take decrease stamina timer, and we'll move him to attributes stamina. Same thing with the other timer name, attributes stamina. For the sprint speed, let's move that to movement. So attributes movement. Same thing for jog speed. And for this is sprinting and the rest of them, let's put them in something that we'll call actions. How about? Oops. Okay, move these to actions as well. Just drag that guy. And actually, we might as well put this one, this is performing action, into that category. So we'll say actions. All right, so that's everything, guys. Sorry it went so long. I know it was, this is probably like a 30-minute video now, but we had a lot of stuff to set up to make sure that we don't trip ourselves up in the future when extending and adding more mechanics to our stamina system. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you liked it. If you liked the videos, like or subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.